So, hi, I'm here with Desiree today. Obviously, if we're talking, things in your life aren't going the way that you had planned. So, I want you to tell everyone a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, my name is Desiree, like you said. I am originally from the Bay Area. I moved over to Texas back in 2019. I have a son with my ex. And they both currently still live in California. Obviously, we went through all the trials and tribulations, and we're still currently going through a lot of the custody battles, of course. And my goal is to help other people that are going through the same situations and help them feel that they're not alone and that their stories do matter as well. And the only way to bring awareness is by speaking up and sharing what you're going through, and hopefully bring more awareness so we can put an end to parental alienation and domestic violence abuse and narcissistic abuse.
Now, a lot of people say that this kind of thing doesn't happen to mothers. What do you say to them?
Shockingly, it does. I never thought, it would happen to me. And from a lot of the research that I've done, I've learned that parental alienation is actually, an extension of domestic abuse. And I myself, as a victim of domestic abuse, it's quite alarming to me. And the more I dug into the rabbit hole, I've noticed there are a lot more mothers that are going through it. And the sad part about it is we kind of get shamed into it, right? Because we are moms, and you don't really hear that many of it because you hear a lot of the father side of the stories of fathers being parental alienated. But when it comes to moms, it's automatically, well, why did you lose custody of your child in the first place?
Mhm.
And not so much of, well, what's the background story? How did it get to where it got to? What led up to that decision? And I feel like a lot of it is shaming a lot of the moms, and it's making us be more silenced, which is, just as unfair as it is for the fathers that are going through it.
Right. Well, I think the fathers get those same questions and they have that same feeling too. They're automatically like, "Oh, did you beat them? Oh, did you molest
Yes.
them? Like what?
Yeah,
What did you do? What did you do to put yourself in this situation?"
definitely.
So,
And I think a
I
lot of
think
the
it's shameful
moms,
for all parents.
of course. And I think a lot of the moms, at least that I've come across, with shaming moms, it's more so, well, were you on drugs? Were you an alcoholic? Were you partying too much? Were you not paying attention to your children? Because what are the odds that moms, are losing custody battles? Whereas in my situation, I don't have, physical custody of my son because he was born in a state. I chose to move to, better my life and be mentally present for my child, which I think is something that a lot of moms lose when they become moms, right? Because we're just automatically told once you're a mom, and that's it. And that's not the case. We tend to not take care of our mental health, which is a huge issue in today's world.
Mhm. It is. It definitely is. So, how long were you married to your child's father?
No, we were never married, but we were together for a couple years. We actually weren't even together when I did get pregnant, but we did try to make it work. But obviously, the abuse got worse progressively, and like every other situation, unfortunately, you have to try and get out of it safely. And thankfully, I did. So I vowed to myself that once I'm able to find my voice, I was going to utilize that voice and help as many victims get out just and be just as safe as, I was able to.
So, when you say abuse, he was physically, mentally,
All of the
emotionally,
above.
all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above.
Were there any charges pressed or anything on
Yes.
him?
So I did press charges the final time, right? So it took some time for me to finally, stand up to him and press charges because it's very hard to remove yourself from that situation. There's a lot of fears going into it, a lot of backfire and shame,
Mhm.
And so when I finally did press charges, it took about 2 years until he finally just admitted and took the plea, which, I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did. But there was a point in time, obviously, when we did try to make things civil for our son. He remarried, or he got married, and that's when it proactively got worse from there.
So, you think she has a part in it?
I wouldn't say that she fully has a full part because he's responsible of his own actions, but
Right.
I do think there's a lot of enabling from, families end and, spousal end. And unfortunately, my side of the family even got involved. And so now they're taking his side, which doesn't look bad or doesn't look good. And in this case, you know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of different dynamics and enabling and a lot of stuff that go into it.
Right. So your family gets to still see your child because they have a relationship with the dad.
Yes, because, of course, and rightfully so, I don't blame them for wanting to have a relationship with him. However, why does it have to go the way that it does? And, it took me a very long time to understand that blood doesn't make family. You create
Right.
your family.
Right. Did you have issues with your family before this?
No, it didn't arise more so until I decided to move to another state. I feel as though, there wasn't support on that end. It was more so, well, how do you just up and leave? And it's not the mere fact that I just up and left. You know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
ways that I wanted to make it work. I wanted to co-parent, find a way to make it work, but it didn't happen in that end. And unfortunately, with the justice system, I think we can all agree the justice system is not justified. It's not fair. A lot of the judges are also very uneducated when it comes to domestic abuse. And one thing I did learn within my research is that there is no actual standard of what's beneficial for the child. So I think a lot of it is held to a very high standard without an actual standard.
Mhm. So they're basically blaming you for knowing that you had to do something to better yourself and
Absolutely.
doing that. Okay.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel that you are better now? How do you feel that you
I
have made these
feel
changes?
Yeah, I feel like, I've accomplished a lot in my life. I feel like I've really turned my life for the better as far as, I'm very proactive with going to therapy. I'm very proactive with healing a lot of my childhood trauma and making sure, that these same cycles don't repeat in my children. I can't, you know, control what's going to happen with my kids in the future, specifically with my son since he's not here and he's unable to really see how much growth I've endured and gone through. But I can, confidently say that I know the right steps to support my children going forward if they ever do need me, and it's not going to be a repeated cycle. And I think that within itself is a huge accomplishment because I'm able to regulate my emotions and not allow someone to belittle me and bring me down. I've learned, a lot of the time it's a lot of projection on other people's ends, and the only thing I can control is myself and how I handle things.
Right. Now you said he would notice a change in the positive. Did he see anything that was negative in you?
I don't feel that he did because he was never really given a fair chance to begin with, right? So when I had moved, we had some visitations, but I would always get an email automatically back saying X, Y, and Z. He feels like X, Y, and Z, but it didn't match what exactly happened while he was here.
Mhm.
So I feel like a lot of the time it was projection on their end because, they're not in control when, our son is, 3 states away with me. They're not able to see what's going on. And I feel like that causes a lot of fear on their end, which I understand, he's over there constantly and I'm not able to know what's going on, but I also respect their parenting time is their parenting time. My
Mhm.
parenting time is my parenting time. And my main focus is to ensure that our son is safe. He has a roof over his head. He has food in his belly. He's having fun. And we're making memories and bonding. I think that's the most important, thing when it comes to parenting. And, with him not being able to have that experience, it's a real shame for a lot of these kids that are going through it.
Yeah. They miss out on a lot by not getting to learn from both of their parents. Let's see. So when did you have custody of him?
So I had full custody of him from the time he was born up until I want to say he was about 3 or 4. We started slowly doing more visitation with his father. He obviously went to jail he was sentenced for a year, but he was only in for 6 months. And then once he was released, it was, supervised visits. And then eventually, like I said, we worked through it and it worked up to 50-50. Up until I had moved in 2019. And it was around 2018 when I had reached out to him to let him know, like, hey, California's getting really expensive. Um, I need to look at other options. And at the time, I was dating my ex, and he had mentioned, Austin, and we had traveled to check it out. And I kind of just fell in love with the state. I loved, the scenery, how green it was. It was very family oriented. And the friends that I had made, a lot of them have kids themselves, and so it felt right with that decision. And when I had mentioned it to him, he put a stop to me moving. It wasn't so much, well, I don't want our son to move. It's, I don't want you to move. Um, and so when we had gone to court, I had to file, to move. And we went to court, and he had his lawyer, and I had my lawyer at the time. And I told them straight up, I don't want to take him away from his siblings, because he does have siblings with his dad. And that's not my ultimate goal. My goal was to ensure that we both had parenting time so we can continue bonding, especially considering this was such a huge risk and such a huge move. And he was still so young.
So how often do you get to have him?
Well, our normal schedule used to be every other break I would have him, and then the holidays we would alternate, and then summers, depending on if he had summer school, which the last 4 years he's been with his dad, he's had summer school, so that cuts out on majority of my parenting time because of that. The last time I saw him was last summer, back in July until August, so I had him for about 20 days. And I
Okay.
haven't seen him since.
And you have parenting time coming up this summer, though?
So it's kind of up in the air. We're still currently dealing with the court proceedings. We have a follow up in March to see how our FaceTimes are going, because I fought really hard to at least have that so I can at least, call my son and tell him,
Sure.
I love you. I miss you. I can't wait to see you. Um,
A
and,
parent should not have to fight for that.
no, they shouldn't. And, a parent shouldn't be muted on the other child's phone to begin with, or
Right.
helicopter parented, right? Where the other parent's in the room. There's just
Yeah.
a lot of lack of boundaries and a lot of lack of respect. And, how do you expect to bond? Because as much as they think it's making me uncomfortable, it's making our son uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've tried to voice it several times, to help the judge understand, but like I said, it's always such a hit or miss gray area, right? Because again, there's no standards when it comes to what's beneficial for the child. There's no, okay, well, what's in the best interest? Explain what the best interest is of a child if there's no standard.
Right.
And when money's involved, unfortunately, the person with the more money or a lawyer is going to automatically have an upper hand.
Right.
And what I would love to do is, help our communities know that you can make this fight on your own as well. You don't need to have money put into it, because at the end of the day, you deserve parental time with your child.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't see why that is such a big issue or so hard to understand for anyone
Yeah.
to understand. I don't know why everyone is
Yeah.
arguing over it. I don't know. I don't understand why, like, they're half each other's. I don't know.
Yeah. Or
I
even
couldn't
having
save this
like,
person. Go ahead.
exactly. Even having, the amount of proof that I have that, I'm not a bad person. I'm human. And the ways that things just get twisted, it's like, at what point does it get exhausting for you to keep doing this? At
Mhm.
what point do you win? You know what I mean? And what is it to you? Like, what is the point of winning to you? Is it that you don't want me in our son's life? Do you just want to be, because I want to be left alone just as much as they do. I'm sure of it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Right.
we broke up for a reason. I want to move on with my life. I want to be in a happy, healthy relationship, which thankfully, I am now. And I truly believe that I'm in a healthier situation because I took the time to really work on myself and really raise my standards. And I wanted my children to see mom being loved the right way and come home to a healthy, present home. Like,
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing, you know?
Right. Now, does your son know about your baby? Is he
He
excited or
does, yes, and so, of course, with a lot of the manipulation, you can never tell, how he truly feels. He isn't, in active therapy as well, and I've had conversations with his therapist because, again, I get those emails, you know what I mean? I get the emails
Mhm.
from, his father and their side, and how dare you do this, and you're only bribing him with a sibling and all this other stuff, and, when we told him we planned it around his next visiting date, right? But that obviously didn't happen. Instead, I was served with an ex parte of an emergency. He's not coming to Texas. We went through court, and, we could have done our gender reveal a lot sooner. We pushed it out because we wanted it to be around the time he was here so he could enjoy it.
Right.
And so, when I spoke to one of his therapists, she had mentioned, I think your head is on straight. It's important to tell him in person versus over the phone. And that's what we had gone back and forth on. Do we tell him over the phone? Do we tell him over FaceTime? Well, I'm not getting the FaceTime calls because my calls are muted. So how do I ensure that I'm able to tell him over the phone? So we had ultimately agreed, I think it's best that we wait until he comes. We'll push out the gender reveal, wait until he comes, and we'll get him a surprise toy to make it seem like he's involved,
Right.
and make it exciting. And obviously I listen to a lot of podcasts on what to do, and did the research, to make sure I was doing everything as best as I could. And so when we were served the papers of him not coming to Texas, um, we went along with the gender reveal. And when I was able to get the FaceTime calls, that first call, we wanted to tell him right then and there. So we did. And you could tell he was excited, but you could also tell his father or someone else was in the room. And so,
Right.
that,
They like look
and
over and
yes, exactly. It's the side eye, right?
yeah.
You can automatically tell, and it's
Yep.
been like that, and I know this, and so it's not so much that I'm trying to tell you like, oh well, you're having a new sibling, like get over it. It's more so let's make this exciting. You have
Right.
siblings at your
Yeah.
dad's house, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, and it's totally fine. It's an adjustment, and we're gonna work through it together. And so he was excited, and I think I want to say it was like maybe a month to 6 weeks later. It was actually on my birthday, of course, right? Because something always happens on some type of special event. I
Right.
received an email, and it was, "How dare you bribe our son with a new sibling to get him to want to come to Texas?" And so, I worked with.
Why shouldn't your son want to come to Texas bribed or not like why would he think he wouldn't want to come regardless of what was there?
I feel like that's the $1,000,000 question, unfortunately, that we're never really going to have a solid answer on, right? I
Right.
don't think it's necessarily that he doesn't want to come to Texas, or maybe it's the fear of flying, which is understandable.
Yeah,
But
but that's not it
regardless,
doesn't sound like it's his fear, it sounds like it's his dad's fear.
projection, yes. And
Yeah,
that's the one thing that, I can thankfully say I've learned to master, is to tell the difference when it's manipulation and projection versus
right,
how our son truly feels, right?
right.
So at that point, when I received that email, I had reached out to my aunt, who's also a child psychiatrist, and I said, hey, let's talk about this because I want to make sure I'm doing everything right. And so on top of that, she helped me with a very solid response, right? Desiree, you need to remove all emotion because it's not about how you feel right now. The main focus is your son. And
Mhm.
she's absolutely right. And that's always been my main priority. And so, I had asked, his father at that point, like, hey, can you give me examples of what I'm saying that's making him uncomfortable? Because how am I supposed to learn? Because
Right.
rightfully so, we may
Yeah.
say things and
But
not even
he's never
realize we're
gonna
saying
do
it.
that though.
Of course not, because now it turned to, well, it's every conversation you're
Right.
saying something
Everything
that's
that you
making him.
say, everything that you do.
Exactly. And then, I got hit with the, are you calling our son a liar? And I'm like, no, I'm
Which
actually
you
trying to
probably said
educate
right in front
myself.
of him or went back
Of
and told him.
course.
Yeah.
And, that's the one thing that I'm really, appreciative of myself, is that I can recognize it right away. And so at this point, I had told him, like you said, our main priority is our son's emotions. I value our son's emotions. I've never disregarded our son's emotions. But how do you expect our son to feel comfortable with being in a new state if he's not coming to the state?
Right.
How
Absolutely.
does how does that make sense? And so at that point, I reached out to our son's therapist and I said, "Hey, I need your help because, in order for me to co-parent and be the best mom, I need to make sure I'm saying everything right and making sure that, if there's something I need to learn and take accountability for, please tell me because otherwise how am I going to grow and be a better parent?" And he had said, first of all, it's straight projection. You're doing everything right. He's actually really excited about the sibling. We've talked about it because, obviously it's a new adjustment. It's something we
Right.
need to talk about. And so, that made me feel like, okay, I'm doing everything right and it's just out of my control. I can't, control his projections, his fears, or anything that, meaning his father. All I can control is working on my mental health, staying present, and when the time comes and he is able to come here, that we just have fun because I don't want him to come here and be like, "Oh my god, what did your dad say? Oh my god, like what's
No,
going
no.
on?" That's
Because
the
then they
least of
get
my
uncomfortable
worries.
in both places.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's the least of my worries. Why do I care at the end of the day, right? He's going to do what he's going to do. He's going to mess up what he's going to mess up. I'm human. I make mistakes too. But the only way to grow is by making mistakes, right? And so if I'm unable
By
to have.
learning from your mistakes, not just making them.
Exactly. Yes, but
Yeah.
learning from them and not
Yeah.
repeating them.
Yes.
And so, I think a lot of the time it is projection, and that's what I've mentioned to every single therapist, which by the way, this is his 8th therapist in 4 years. I've
There's some wrong
mentioned to
there too.
Yes, and I've mentioned every single time my biggest fear is that our son's anxiety is caused by the fear projection of his father and stepmother. And another thing I most recently learned about is emotional incest, right? And so bringing it back to his stepmother, when it comes to emotional incest, what does she have? She has our son. And so, of course, it's not so much incest in the sense of sexually, but it's more so emotionally, right? Well, we're just going to miss you so much if you leave, or, you're just going to miss out on so much. And that adds so much more anxiety onto a child. So it makes sense why he's acting up prior to visits. He doesn't want to upset either parent. That's
Right.
completely understandable. And why should he have that pressure on him? I've always questioned, why can't it be, oh my gosh, you get to go see your mom, you get to go see, you get
Right.
to feel baby's kicks, and you get to spend time with your upcoming new stepfather. You know what I mean? And instead of allowing him to have a bigger family, why take that away from a child?
Right. Well, that they can start at a very young age. The
Hmm.
manipulating, oh, well, if you go, I'm going to be sad, or you're going to miss your best friend's birthday party,
Yes.
or you're
And
going to
I've
do this,
seen
or
the
your
text
dad's
messages.
not going to take care of you like I will, or your mom's not going to do this
Yes.
or let you do this. Yeah.
Yes. And I've
That's,
seen
yeah.
the text messages, you know what I mean? Like, while he's spending time with us, it's constantly, can you have him call us? Can you have him text us? Where is his phone? And it's taking away time from my parental time.
Right.
How am
And are
I
they
supposed
quick
to
to
be
jump
parent?
when you want to talk to them?
No.
Do they think it's as important when you want to
No,
speak to them or you want to text to them?
because
Yeah.
their underlining argument is, well, if he wants to talk to you, he'll talk to you.
Right. Right. But doesn't work the other way.
No. No.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've definitely seen this. So have you taken anything from the therapist to the judge?
Not yet, because like I said, our next court date's in March, and I'm sure it's going to be brought up with the whole, well, she's making him uncomfortable by mentioning Texas. And, with our phone calls, they're anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. They're not long because I just want to tell him, hey, I love you. I miss you. We can't wait to see you. Um, excuse me, in which, I brought it up to the therapist. This is exactly what I say. Am I saying the right thing? And, his father had mentioned, well, by you saying we can't wait to see you is assuming that he's going to be coming to Texas soon, which is giving him anxiety. And I had asked the therapist, is that true? Because I'm trying to understand his thought process, right?
Right.
And he goes, well, no, and I don't see anything wrong with you saying it, but I would, maybe add, it doesn't matter the location, whether it's here, there, anywhere. We just can't wait to see you. And I
Right.
think that should be important. And so I've started adding that, because again, I'm learning, I'm trying to make sure I'm doing everything right. So I don't say it every single time, but I do make sure I tell him every time, I love you and I miss you, because I think that's the most important thing a child needs to hear, is that he is loved, he is missed.
Right. Well, maybe in front of the judge, you can use that and say, my ex-husband is saying that our son is kind of stressed out because he doesn't know what the future holds.
Yeah,
Would it be possible if you gave me set visitation and asked his father to put it into a calendar so he knows what the future holds, and then that
absolutely.
will alleviate that anxiety that he has.
Absolutely. And I also have done research on reunification therapy as well too. And I've done the research to find therapists out here as well. Like I mentioned, I'm in active therapy, and so my therapist has mentioned the importance of us going and doing therapy together as well.
Okay.
Whether it may be with my current therapist or finding another therapist that, is well aware and has studied parental alienation and reunification. But I mean, it's important that we do this together. How am I supposed to do this if he's in California or I'm forced to go to California, right?
Right.
And how is that going to help him again be comfortable with our life here? How is that going to help him bond with his sister over here, or his stepfather over here, or his stepfather's family over here, who are wanting to spend time with him and spoil him and treat him like their own grandchild. And that's exciting for kids. More presents, more gifts, more family time, more love and support. And I just, as a mother, I can't imagine taking that away from my child, when I've always been so giving on their end. And when they were pregnant, I went over backwards, and I did all the visits in California when they were pregnant because of the fears of their own fears of COVID. And I did what I could. And now that it's my turn, it's like, well, that's not really fair. And it stinks, but it's out of my control.
Right. So he has younger siblings on his dad's side, but
Yes,
those
yeah.
weren't used to manipulate him to live with his dad?
I guess not. I mean, I've never said it. At the end of the
No,
day,
I know, but I'm just saying
yeah.
you
Of
see that.
course. It's
Yeah.
it's it's quite, I don't want to say it's comical, but it is comical, right? Because you get to a point once you go through your healing journey and you start recognizing the cycles. And I don't want to say I'm a few steps ahead, but I am a few steps ahead
Right,
because I'm already anticipating what's going to happen.
right,
But I think what's really honestly kept me very level-headed and calm is knowing that there will be a time where he turns 18 and he's going to be an adult. And at what point, when he gets social media, are they going to block all the slander that they've posted about me on social media to hide it from him? I mean, you can see a huge difference between my social media posts versus their social media posts. I'm trying to raise awareness and, utilize the situations of what's really happening in the world,
mhm,
versus them just constantly slandering me and creating a narrative that fits their storyline, because they don't want to take accountability of what's really happening and the abuse that they're really putting onto our child.
right. Yeah, I know that the family court system does not like this being talked about online.
No, yeah.
They
And
don't like
that's,
it at all.
they don't. And, I've tried mentioning it because, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Am I afraid to ever go back to California? Absolutely, because of the amount of slandering, right? I don't think it's safe for me to go back to California or be in a state where I'm constantly having to look over my shoulder just to spend time with my son. I don't think that that's quite fair, and that's putting our son in a really awkward position
Mhm.
when we have a house, we have a huge backyard, we have everything, that we can provide for him just as much as you do. Why, again, are you going to take that away from him?
Yeah. No, you should be able to live your life the way you wanna live it, and your son should be able to be a part of that no matter where that is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, that's also the one thing that I also want to bring awareness to, is that it's okay to leave, where you live, to move, especially if you're not with your spouse anymore and you have a custody situation. you should be allowed to live where your heart deserves to be and where you feel safe. And I don't think I will ever feel safe being in my hometown because of the slander. And I don't think it will ever be fixed because the disrespect is just so high that it's just not
Mhm.
worth going back to that place and being back in a place that broke me.
Right. Well, you shouldn't have to move anywhere that you don't want to move, and this shouldn't really be an issue. It should be figured out. You know, you live here. He's off of school this time. You should
Yeah.
have him for spring break, for summer,
Yeah.
for as much as you can have him, or maybe they want to switch. Maybe they want you to have
Yeah.
him for school,
And it
and then
shouldn't
they
be
can
so
have him
stressed
with
out,
them.
right? It shouldn't be
Right.
such a stressful situation. It should be like, hey, something came up. Can we switch? Okay, cool. As long as you get to spend the time with them, that's what matters most. You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's
And
what adults do. That's not, yeah.
that is, yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
goes back to what I was saying is that it shouldn't matter at what location each parent lives at. What matters is the time spent with the child. That's most important. And why is it such an issue where I live? And why is it such an issue to keep him away from that?
Right. It's not. It's just the most convenient thing to use.
Yeah. Because it's really what they only have, right? They don't have anything else on me. I literally stay home and I try to do as much research to better myself, and that's all I have.
Right. Well, I hope you get back in front of a judge. You can show him all the things that you've been doing and learning, and I would definitely go to his therapist and ask him for a letter that you're gonna go in front of the judge and just to see how it's going and how he feels about you and your input in the situation and that kind of stuff. I would definitely take that to the judge when you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I say, I anytime I get an email from his father or anything, I automatically go to the therapist because I think the therapist should know what exactly is going down behind closed doors because this all affects our son.
Mhm.
And if the actions don't match the words, it's manipulation 100%. And so if he's saying, well, our son's uncomfortable being in Texas and doesn't like it, how is that the case when he's having fun playing? And I have multiple videos and pictures, and he's not asking to cut the visitation short. He's not asking to call his dad every single day. He's literally just being a kid. And that's what we should respect him as, is being a kid.
Well, and maybe you should throw it back at him and say, "Okay, well, what can we do together as his parents to make him comfortable coming to visit his mother? Because I would assume that you would think that I am an important person in his life."
Yeah,
And then let
exactly.
him answer. And if he doesn't answer, take that with you to court too and say, "Your Honor, I'm asking him for his opinion. I'd like to work with him because we are his parents, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to do that."
Yeah.
So,
Yes. That is definitely something that I do plan on doing this upcoming court date. So I'm hoping it works out in my favor, but I'm also, at the point where I've accepted it. I'm just going to voice, the situation and be truthful, and hopefully it works out in my favor. And if it doesn't, it's out of my control.
right. Well, maybe. We'll see.
Yes.
I don't think things necessarily out of our control, maybe out of our timing,
Yes.
but I don't I think if you keep fighting, then you'll
Yeah. And that's the
then you'll
one thing I don't think I could ever see myself doing is to stop fighting. I'm gonna keep voicing the situations and keep sharing my stories because I think that's important. Do I fear that they're gonna twist it? Absolutely. Do I know that they're gonna twist it? Absolutely. But that's what's out of my control because I can't control what they're gonna do at the end of the day. All I can control is what I can do to make a
right.
difference.
Well, and I think the more people like us who are putting things out there, the more, people who don't even I didn't know what parental alienation was. I didn't know people did this to their kids. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
And I have my best friend that I've had since we were 14 years old, and I didn't even realize she was parental alienated from, her family. And, the more that she's by my side, cheering me on through this fight and this battle, she's realizing more about her childhood. And so that obviously helps me with my fight because I've seen how much she's grown. And I'm like, well, what can I do to be better? Right. Because I don't want to be like that. And we were blinded by it as kids. We didn't realize she was going through what she was going through
Right,
until it's happening to you. And a lot of, children don't understand that they're being parental alienated until they are adults and going through the same thing, or seeing their friends going through the same thing.
Right. Right. Or find a significant other who has a good
Yeah.
relationship with their family, and they're like, "Well, why don't you see your dad?" And they'll be like, "Well, my mom said he's bad." We're like, "Well, you didn't know that he was bad? Or why didn't you see your mom?" "Well, my dad
Yeah.
said she was bad." "Well, do you think she was bad?"
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and
so
that's the thing that shocks me with most of the parental issues, right? Is parental alienation is when one parent is bad and the other parent is good. That's
yes.
the hugest red flag in choosing whether, or to signify whether or not it's parental alienation, right?
Right.
Because regardless, there's always going to be two parents, but there's a plant seeded to make it seem that one parent is bad.
Right. And the odd thing is the parent who is home with them all the time, complaining about them not doing their homework, making them clean their room, doing all this stuff that the kid necessarily doesn't like,
Mhm.
they never have anything bad to say about that parent. But the
No.
parent where they're going and visiting on the weekends and they're having fun and they don't really have a lot of responsibilities because they're not with that parent all the time, and the parent doesn't want to use that time to like lecture their kid or do anything, that then all of a sudden that's a parent they have the issue with.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and like I said, it's become more comical to me, right? Because how am I a bad parent by making sure that our child has a room? No matter what, location I live in, he's always had his room. Once I moved out of California and was able to afford it, I always made sure he had his own room. I
Right.
always made sure he was well fed. I studied nutrition for a reason because, again, what's another red flag of abuse? Geriatric issues, right? And so, what has he had for the last 5 years? Stomach issues, in which I've had conversations with doctors about it. And a lot of the time, doctors are not even well educated when it comes to nutrition because they want to slap a band aid over it and call it a day and grab a paycheck. And so I went out of my way to do that because I think it's important to know what you're feeding your body and your soul at the end of the day.
Right. Well, I think they have a lot of stomach issues too, because that's kind of where your nerves are and they're
Yeah.
getting
It
tight
stores
and
a
stuff.
lot of the trauma too,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the trauma is stored into your stomach and into your hips and all that stuff. Back problems, all of that. It's just stored trauma.
Yeah. And I've seen even myself, kids when they're going from one parent to the next, so they'll get sick. Like they'll be
Yes.
sick before they get there. They'll be sick before they have to go back to the other one. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah. And it is common. It's very common. And it ties back to when I'm being told, well, he's having anxiety and stomach issues prior to coming, but once he's here, there's no issues.
Right. Then
Um,
who's giving him those issues? Like who's feeding
yeah.
them those
So
issues?
I'm kind of confused on how come that's not being looked at, but I'm being looked at. So it makes no sense. And in that
Well, I
case,
think once they
I
have in their mind what they want, that's just it. It doesn't matter
yes,
what you
it's
show
this it's
these
the
people.
story that they created, and
Yeah,
they're gonna find any reason to back up the story that they created. They're gonna twist whatever they can, find whatever flying monkeys they can to
yeah,
support them, and go from there.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's the same story, but I'm sure there's a lot of moms who are happy, not happy that you're going through the same thing, but just
Yes,
happy that they're, and because
there's
people are
someone
kind
else
of
going through it.
right, right, and people are
Yeah,
kind of ganging up on moms saying this doesn't really happen, but there are a lot of advocacy groups run by women who are trying to squash parental alienation and say it's only
yeah.
used by abusers, which is not true.
No,
So, and I think those
and
women who are trying to squash it are probably the abusers because it's
yeah,
more of a parental alienation is more of a mind game. That's more of a women's field
it
than
is.
a man's field. Man's more physical,
So
more
it's very rare that, women are being parental alienated, which is why I wanted to come forward and say, "Hey, it's happening to us too."
yeah,
Unfortunately, it's like I said, it's a proxy, it's an extension of domestic abuse.
it is.
It's another form of control, and,
Yeah,
not saying that it's mainly men that are abusive, because there are women that are abusive too, but, it's that control. It's, "Well, I wanna hold you accountable because our relationship didn't work out," or whatever the case may
right,
be.
right.
So,
Or I wanted you back, or
yeah. This is the way I can have you in my corner and hold on
yeah,
to you.
Yeah.
um,
I'll get your
which
attention one way or another.
which blows my mind because if you're, in a happy, healthy relationship with another person, why hold back the other parent? That's what blows my mind, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that could be, well, I don't know. I've seen it both ways where the other person has moved on, but there's still a thorn in their ex's
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
So, and I know it had nothing to do with the person that they were with. So that was all on
yeah.
them. You can't make sense of these people. Your brain's
No.
not sick and doesn't work that way. So,
Yeah. And it's a shame to see because, we as a culture and a community, we should be working on ourselves. We should want to be healthy and have our children see us be healthy so that they repeat the same cycles, positive cycles, right? We are the starting creators of their standards and relationships, and if, mom is not being treated with respect or dad's not treated with respect, that's creating that boundary and that standard for the child as they grow up and become getting into committed relationships.
oh yeah. I mean, they're teaching these children that the only one parent matters, only one parent has a
Yeah.
voice. You can totally cut off the other parent. You can be disrespectful to the other parent. You
Yeah.
can waste everyone's money in court on ridiculous
Oh, yes. And
ridiculous.
courts
You
are
should
making
just
the
be
most
doing the
money
right
out of
thing.
it.
The court
Yeah.
does You don't need to go to court. You just
No.
do the right thing.
No, and like I've always been told and I've always preached, you can't co-parent unless both parents want to co-parent. That's the only way it's going to work out is if both parents are open and willing to co-parent.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. All right, Desiree. Well, it was nice talking to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again. And
Absolutely.
anything else you'd like to say before you go? Or
I think for everyone, just know that you're not in this situation alone and there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel. And in order to make changes, you have to try and find your voice and find that outlet and create a really good support system because I know that if I didn't create a good support system and I didn't take those risks, I wouldn't be mentally where I am today. And I think that's something that's really important to share is that you're not alone. There's always someone that is going through it or has gone through it. And, the more you work on yourself, the more you're going to find people that are along the same vibration that's in the same boat and have gone through it. So keep
right.
pushing.
And when you hear stories like yours and other people, not saying to you, but for other people, don't judge.
No,
Because you do not know what that person is going through. I have seen many people who have done absolutely nothing wrong, are nothing but exemplary parents and haven't seen their
absolutely.
children in years. So
Absolutely.
does not have to be anything, and it's probably not something that the other parent has done.
Yeah. And, there's always, three sides to every story. At the end of the day, do your research, trust
Yeah,
your gut.
unless you're in the family court system, then there's like 7 sides of it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, at that point, it's not even our battle, right? It's
No.
just it's up to the courts and that's just it.
Right. All right, well, you have a good one. It was good talking to you, and I'll
You
talk to
as
you soon.
well. Yes, we'll
Thanks.
chat later. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye-bye.